Of course. But before I leave, you should know the board already has the evidence.
Your position is eliminated. Security will escort you out. My CEO said those words without looking up from his laptop. He thought he was erasing 7 years of my life with one signature. What he did not know was that the company he was stealing could not survive a single day without the evidence sitting inside my red notebook. Hello, my name is Claire Bennett, and until that Tuesday morning, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Northstar Medical Systems in Chicago. I had joined Northstar when it was 6 people, 2 borrowed offices, and a prototype that failed every third test. We built software that helped hospitals track critical equipment, ventilators, infusion pumps, and emergency monitors. The work was not glamorous, but when our system worked, and nurses found life-saving equipment faster, that mattered to me. For 7 years, I gave the company everything. I hired our first support team. I negotiated our first hospital contract. I slept under my desk during a system failure and answered calls on Christmas morning. By the time Northstar employed 400 people and served hospitals in 12 states, I knew every process, every risk, and almost every employee by name. Our CEO, Harlan Voss, liked to tell investors he had built Northstar from nothing. The truth was more complicated. Harlan was the founder and the public face, but I was the person who turned his ideas into something hospitals could actually use. For years, I accepted that arrangement. I did not need my face on magazine covers. I wanted the company to be useful, stable, and honest. Then, 6 months before I was fired, Harlan changed. He hired a young finance executive named Evan Rourke and gave him the title of Chief Strategy Officer. Evan had never worked in healthcare. He spoke in expensive phrases and carried no notebook because, as he once told me, details are what junior people are for. Within weeks, invoices began arriving from consulting firms I had never heard of. The vendor payments were split into amounts just below the level that required board approval. Revenue forecasts rose even though new contracts were slowing down. When I asked Evan about it, he smiled and said, "Claire, you are operational. Let the vision people handle the future." That sentence did not offend me. It warned me. I started asking careful questions. I requested supporting documents. I compared invoices, contract dates, and bank approvals. Most answers arrived late. Some never arrived at all. Then our compliance director, Marisol Vega, came into my office after everyone had gone home. She closed the door and placed a red notebook on my desk. "Do not put this on the company network," she whispered. Inside were dates, invoice numbers, and the names of 3 shell companies. Each company appeared to be independent. In reality, all 3 led back to an address owned by Evan's brother-in-law. The payments totaled just over $8 million. My stomach turned cold. "Does Harlan know?" I asked. Marisol looked at me for a long moment. "I think Harlan approved it. We agreed to verify everything before making an accusation. We followed our legal duties carefully. We preserved only records we were authorized to access, documented the internal controls that had been bypassed, and prepared a confidential report for the board's audit committee." 2 days before our scheduled meeting with the committee chair, Marisol disappeared from work. Human Resources told the staff she had resigned for personal reasons. Her email account was disabled before lunch. Her office was emptied by the end of the day. But at 11:47 that night, I received a message from an unknown number. I did not resign. They threatened my immigration sponsorship and my husband's job. Do not trust internal email. Finish the report. That was the moment I understood I was no longer investigating bad accounting. I was standing inside a planned corporate theft. I completed the report and contacted Ruth Feldman, the independent chair of the board's audit committee. Ruth was a retired federal prosecutor with a reputation for asking short questions that made dishonest people sweat. She agreed to meet me on Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday morning, Harlan's assistant called and said the CEO wanted to see me immediately. When I entered his office, Harlan did not offer me a chair. Evan stood by the window. Denise Cole, the head of human resources, sat beside a security supervisor. A manila envelope rested in the center of Harlan's desk. I knew exactly what was happening. "Your position is eliminated," Harlan said. "Security will escort you out." He slid the termination papers toward me, as if he were returning an unwanted restaurant bill. The document offered 12 weeks of salary if I waived every legal claim, promised not to criticize the company, and agreed that every note or record in my possession belonged to Northstar. Harlan still did not look at me. "Sign the acknowledgement," Denise said. "You have 7 days to consider the separation agreement." I read every line. Then I signed only the acknowledgement confirming that I had received the papers. I wrote the exact time beside my name. Harlan finally looked up. I smiled and said, "Let's make sure we do this properly." For the first time, Evan's confidence flickered. I asked Denise to confirm, in writing, that the decision had been made before I entered the room. I asked whether the board had authorized the elimination of an executive officer. I asked whether Northstar was placing a legal hold on records connected to the compliance report submitted by Marisol and me. No one answered. The security supervisor shifted uncomfortably. He knew this was not a normal dismissal. I closed the envelope and stood. One more thing, I said. My employment agreement requires notice to the audit committee before I can be removed for cause or during an active compliance investigation. Harlan's face hardened. This is restructuring, not cause. Then you will have no problem documenting that. Security walked me through the building. People watched from behind glass walls. Some looked frightened, others looked away. I carried one cardboard box containing a framed photograph, a coffee mug, and a small plant that had somehow survived 7 Chicago winters. I did not carry the red notebook. 3 weeks earlier, after Marisol vanished, I had delivered the original to my attorney, Daniel Cho. A verified copy had already been sent to Ruth Feldman under the company's whistleblower policy. The notebook was never mine to hide or destroy. It was protected evidence, preserved through the correct legal channel. Outside the building, the security supervisor handed me his card. I was told to disable your badge at 8 this morning, he said quietly. The meeting wasn't until 10. That small fact mattered. It showed the result had been decided in advance. At 10:36, I was standing on the sidewalk without a job. At 2:00, I walked into Ruth Feldman's law office for the meeting Harlan thought he had prevented. Ruth had already read our report. She did not waste time. Did they fire you after learning about this meeting? She asked. Less. Did they ask where the evidence was? They tried to make me sign a statement surrendering all notes and records. And Ruth leaned back. Then they made this much worse for themselves. That afternoon, she notified the full board and demanded an emergency session. She also instructed outside counsel to preserve emails, accounting records, access logs, and security footage. Harlan tried to postpone the meeting. Ruth refused. By Wednesday morning, the Northstar's board knew that its CEO had terminated the person scheduled to report suspected fraud to the audit committee. Harlan reacted exactly as frightened, powerful men often do. He attacked my character. He told the board I was bitter because Evan was being considered as his successor. He claimed I had exceeded my authority. He suggested Marisol and I had invented concerns to protect our jobs. Then he sent an email to the entire company saying my departure was part of a strategic simplification. The phrase became a joke before lunch. But the laughter did not last. Evan ordered employees to delete draft budgets and duplicate vendor files. Information technology received instructions to reset Marisol's former laptop. A junior accountant named Tyler Reed was told to change the description on several payments from market advisory services to software development. Tyler refused. That evening, he called me. The Bennett, I think they are changing records, he said, his voice shaking. I told him not to send me anything and not to take records he was not authorized to possess. I gave him the contact information for the board's outside counsel and advised him to report what he had seen through the protected channel. He did. The next twist came from an unexpected place. A Northstar's largest hospital customer, Mercy Lakes Health, called because my account had been disabled without a transition plan. Their 5-year renewal, worth nearly $60 million, required certification from the chief operating officer that our safety controls had passed review. There was no chief operating officer anymore. Evan tried to sign the certification himself. Mercy Lakes rejected it because he was neither named in the contract nor qualified under its safety clause. Harlan had removed me so quickly that he had forgotten the company's biggest contract depended on my office. The renewal was suspended. Investors began asking questions. Employees began updating their odd sum A's. 2 hospital clients delayed new orders. Northstar's carefully polished image started cracking in public. Still, I did not celebrate. 400 employees had mortgages, families, and medical bills. I wanted Harlan and Evan held responsible, but I did not want innocent people destroyed with them. So I proposed a solution to Ruth. I would return temporarily as an independent transition officer, reporting only to the board, not to Harlan. I would stabilize hospital operations, protect staff, and complete the safety certification. In exchange, the board would place Harlan and Evan on administrative leave while outside investigators followed the money. Ruth took the proposal to the directors. Harlan called it blackmail. The board called it survival. On Friday morning, only 3 days after security escorted me out, I walked back into Northstar through the same glass doors. This time, no cardboard box was in my hands. Ruth walked beside me. 2 outside attorneys followed us. The employees in the lobby became silent. Harlan was waiting near the elevators. "You will not take my company," he said. I looked him directly in the eye. "I'm not here to take it. I'm here to stop you from burying it." Then Ruth handed him a board resolution suspending his authority. Security escorted Harlan upstairs to collect his personal belongings. The justice sometimes has a sense of symmetry. The investigation lasted 11 weeks. Each week revealed another layer. The shell companies had charged Northstar for research that never existed. They even had routed money through them, then used part of it to purchase property in Arizona. Harlan had approved the payments because Evan promised to help him inflate Northstar's valuation before a private sale. They planned to sell their shares at the higher price before the missing cash and false forecasts were discovered. They had also tried to create a false story around me. The draft emails found in Evan's account showed a plan to blame operational failures on my resistance to modernization. My termination was supposed to make me look responsible just before the sale, but their plan contained one fatal weakness. They believed loyalty made me careless. I had been loyal to Northstar's mission, not to Harlan's ego. Every unusual payment I questioned had a date. Every warning had a witness. Every report followed the company's written policy. I had not built a secret weapon. I had simply done my job properly, while they assumed rules were for weaker people. Marisol agreed to speak with investigators after the board guaranteed protection against retaliation. Her testimony connected Harlan directly to the threats. Tyler's report proved that records had been targeted after my firing. The building's access logs confirmed that my account was disabled before the termination meeting, and the security footage showed Evan carrying document boxes out of the finance department late that same night. When outside counsel presented the findings, Harlan stopped calling it restructuring. He hired a criminal defense attorney. The board terminated Harlan and Evan for cause. Their unvested shares were canceled under the company's misconduct provisions. The Northstar referred the evidence to federal authorities and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. Months later, both men were charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, and obstruction. The criminal case took longer, but eventually Evan pleaded guilty and agreed to testify. Harlan fought until the end, insisting he had only followed bad advice. A jury did not believe him. He was convicted, but my story did not end with a courtroom. The board offered me the permanent CEO position. For 7 years, I had imagined what it would feel like to hear that offer. I expected triumph. Instead, I felt tired. I asked for 24 hours. That evening, I sat with Marisol in a quiet restaurant overlooking the Chicago River. She had accepted a new role with an ethics organization. The Tyler had been promoted and was helping rebuild the finance department. "Are you going to take the job?" Marisol asked. I looked at the lights reflected in the water. "Only if the company changes," I said. The next morning, I gave the board my conditions. No executive would control the compliance department. Employees who reported misconduct would have direct access to the audit committee. Executive bonuses would depend on customer safety and staff retention, not only revenue. And a portion of recovered funds would repay employees whose retirement accounts had been harmed by the fraud. The board accepted every condition. I became CEO of Northstar Medical Systems on the first Monday of October. My first company-wide meeting was held in the same room where Harlan used to announce record growth while hiding record theft. I did not give a speech about winning. I spoke about responsibility. A company is not its founder, I told the employees. It is not its highest-paid executive or the name on the office door. A company is the promise we make to the people who depend on our work. If leadership breaks that promise, leadership must change. We recovered most of the stolen money. Mercy Lakes renewed its contract. No mass layoffs were needed. Trust returned slowly, one honest decision at a time. I kept the termination papers. They are framed inside my office now. Not because I enjoy remembering the humiliation, but because I never want to forget the lesson. Harlan believed power meant being able to remove someone without looking them in the eye. He believed a title could make his lies true, and a security escort could turn 7 years of service into nothing. He was wrong. The day he fired me, I walked out carrying a dying plant and a cardboard box. 3 days later, I returned carrying the truth. And in the end, the position that was truly eliminated was never mine.